Hey church fam, what up? Welcome to another episode of Chit, Chat, Chill. Today we have a young man who is a student of the word, a young man who loves the Lord and of course is doing great things for the Lord. A young man who has the word of God on his mind and he's very passionate about the Word of God. And just before I introduce him, I just want to say thank you for those who have subscribed already, and also for those who have not yet subscribed to the channel, just go ahead and click the subscription button. That's the red button below, and also click the notification bell so that you will be notified when fresh content is out. Also, I'm encouraging you to just leave a feedback on the video after we are through, or even during, if you just feel so led to, share something, share your thought, and something that we will be discussing. So, the young man that we are talking about today is Javan Samuels. We studied together at the Bethel Bible College, and as a matter of fact, we shared a room for a year. He's my roomie for not my last year, but my third year. He was in his final year. I was a third year student at the time. And of course, like I said, it's a young man of the word. He's passionate about the word of God, constantly researching and going deeper into the word of God. And because I know his passion, I call him here today for us to discuss the existence of God. This is a very deep topic. Many of us perhaps don't even stop to think about, where God come from, or sometimes it's when we are reasoning with some Rastafarian or some persons of other religions or even atheists, then we start to think about these things and we don't even have the answer to all of this. So we will be, unraveling it and wrestling with the existence of God today. All right, so Javan, what going, brother?
I give thanks.
Yeah, man, it's good to have you. It's good to have you.
Same.
It's been a while coming in because I have topics like these in my mind, and I've been thinking about who are some persons that I can bring on to discuss, these topics, because a lot of times we feel like topics like these are too deep, especially for my core audience, which are younger people, younger Christians. So, for a while I've been like, no man, there's no topic that is too deep, because they are out there along with the crowd and everyone with the various thoughts. You go on Google, you see so many thoughts coming out, so we need to empower our young people. To some of them are even wrestling with questions like these, so we have to empower them in dealing with these things. Javan, let us go straight into business. Does God really exist?
Does God exist? Wow, a big question, $1 million question. Well, just before we get to that question of does God exist? What I want to say is that I've come to realize a problem or an issue in Christendom that within our context, we focus more on the existence of God from an experiential perspective. We don't use the word existence of God, but we focus on God more experientially than educationally. And the reality is that the existence of God is not a conclusion to be reached, but a given that must be assumed. And that is because the Bible makes authoritative claim from its very first verse that in the beginning God. And by that statement, it is not saying that God is a part of the creation, but that God is the creator of that creation. And if we should go a few verses further, in that very same chapter of the first book of the Bible, we see we're in the same God made man in his likeness and in his image. Hence, we have what Saint Augustine calls the sensus divinitatis, or the sense of the divine, an idea of God inside of all of us. And so the reality is that, Dermaine, that as Psalm 14 verse 1 says, only the fool says in his heart, there is no God. So, what we really should be arguing, and as I would say, should be putting forth to everyone, is that we are dealing with the arguments for the existence of God, because the existence of God in and of itself is a given. So yeah.
So the existence of God is there for us all to see. So it's not even if God exists.
Right.
It should be
Since-
what evidence are there
Yeah.
to prove the existence of God.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
Makes
because
sense.
how dare us, talk about if God exists.
If God exists.
Yeah,
Because creation itself declares that.
Yeah.
And I want us to go into some arguments now. And the first argument that I want us to explore is the ontological argument, What is that? For somebody who don't know, somebody who's not in the whole theological thing, what does that mean?
Yeah, man. And just before we touch on the argument, just to go back to the question that you asked, does God exist? Because the reality is that from a purely philosophical perspective, to say that God exists is something that we should really run away from. Yeah. Because the word exists comes from the Latin word existere. Yeah. Ex means out of, and stere, S-T-E-R-E, means to stand. So to stand out of something. And whatever that something is, it must have one foot in being and another foot in becoming or non-being. And the only creature or the only being that I know of who has that functionality are human beings, you and I. So we really should speak of God as self-existent, which now takes us to the very first argument, which is popularly known as the ontological argument, which is the argument from being. And, what I've come to really love and appreciate is that we have such a rich heritage as Christians, that God has given the church such great minds. And one of the mind who tackled this issue was Saint Thomas Aquinas, and he argued the ontological argument by saying that existence cannot come from non-existence. Something must exist by its own necessity, not mere possibility. And Thomas Aquinas was really piggybacking on the philosopher and theologian who came before him, who was St. Anselm, who had a famous quote that he used to describe this ontological argument. He said that God is that being than which no greater can be conceived. In a more modern sense, what he's saying is God is the greatest conceivable being. Yes. So what Anselm was really getting at is that unlike Plato and Aristotle, who believed in a pure being, but that pure being was just a concept, was just in the realm of the mind, Anselm says that the God in which we are describing is not a concept, but is a person. And that is important where the ontological argument is concerned, that we are speaking of a being who is self-existent, but who shares what we call personality or relatability. And that is such important.
Yeah. So the argument really is to show that it's impossible for nothing to create something. It's impossible for some of the scientists some of the persons who would have adhered to Darwin theory of evolution or even Big Bang theory and so on, they would argue that there was nothing and then it creates something. But you're saying that that's not possible
Right.
for nothing to create something. So there is a being, a mind, an intellect that is actively involved in the creation of everything that we see, right?
Yeah.
And this now will take us into our next argument.
Right.